Hello, and welcome to episode 103 of Radio Gorepress. And yes, I did say 103 and not 103. I refuse.
Here's the thing, I've never cared about that. I just enjoy ribbing you about it.
Well, I don't bow to peer pressure.
Well, I think 100 and 100 are both perfectly valid, to be honest.
Oh, cool. Let's go with that then. So we're agreed. 103. I am Sarah, as always. Joining me, as ever, is my lovely co-host Phil. How are you doing, Philip?
I'm good. I have leg brace on, my foot brace on. My foot's getting better. Been cracking on with work, and saw my family over the weekend, which was very nice because we haven't seen each other in about a year now. So,
you lucky bastard.
I know. Must be tough. It's a long old journey, isn't it, for you?
It is. It's about 300 miles and I don't drive, so that complicates things.
Yeah.
However, my parents have, I think today, had their second dose of the vaccine.
Okay.
So we are getting ever closer to being able to see one another.
They can go around licking whatever and whoever they want.
They can. I wouldn't recommend it, but I think they'd be safe from COVID. It's been a strange old time, hasn't it? I don't normally miss my family that much, which is a horrible, horrible thing to say, but I feel like I have object permanence issues. If I don't see somebody for a long period of time, I'm just like, oh, they exist. Huh. But yeah, it's gotten to the point where even I am like pining to see my folks.
Yeah,
so.
It was weird. I could go for months without doing like a certain kind of activity.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm like, I've been told I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, I want to do it now.
Yeah, the little brat that lives in all of us. Defiant little brat. No, I agree. It will be nice to get back to normal. It'd be nice to see you. It'd be nice to see Rosie. It'll just be nice to like be able to hug.
Yeah, I know.
I've missed hugging the most.
For sure.
I feel like we are starting to see, isn't it just? I feel like we are starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel at this point.
Yeah, I think now it's going to be like now it's going to be a telltale time, really, because with the 29th of March is when kind of activities are starting. You can start to go outside and see people, up to 6 people outside. And then
12th of April, I think, is the big one, because that's when
non-essential shops open.
Yeah, and then hair salons, tattoo parlours.
It's the 17th of May where you can start going. Because that's the thing I miss, is having people over and seeing other people.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to go outside and chat, but I want to watch films with people. I want to go in and hang out.
Right? Outside is overrated.
Yeah, right.
Let's stay indoors and have movie nights.
But obviously with all of those restrictions being lifted, now is the time in which things could go south if we're not careful. Because it's one thing to have the schools reopen, which happened a couple of weeks back, but yeah. But then, the vaccine rollout is going really well from everything I've heard. So, and
yeah, I mean, the country's run by A1 just genius galaxy-brained individuals that I have absolute faith in, don't you?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
It's gone so well so far. What could go wrong?
Don't jinx it.
I don't think I'm... Oh, yeah, if everything goes wrong, it's me. Because I said a thing on a podcast. I'm not accepting blame. Je refuse. So before we get too bogged down in politics yet again, I would like to do a quick little intro and just let you guys know that this is a show that has been requested. It's been talked about for, I think, probably a couple of years at this point. We've been toying with the idea of doing this film. Mm-hmm. So I'm super duper duper stoked.
Soaked? Super stoked. Super soaker. Stoked.
I am so excited. I'm sliding off my chair. To finally cover Dellamorte Dellamore. There was no way to recover that, Phil.
Just embrace it. I had
to.
I love it.
I had to double down on the grossness.
It must be like your brain must have been like, clamouring to say Super Soaker.
I think it was.
And you slipped up and said, super soaked. We're all super soaked here at Radio Gorepress.
Do you know what, mate? I got 80 orders in the post yesterday. My brain is fried. You are lucky I can string sentences together. So before we dive in deep, I just want to say I've mentioned this film on probably numerous podcasts at this point, and I'm really ashamed, which isn't a thing that happens very often, because I think my sense of shame probably abandoned me years ago. I've been pronouncing it wrong this whole time.
Shock.
And I'm generally fairly good with these things, but I've not only been mispronouncing the title of the film, I've been mispronouncing the director's name too.
Oh, okay. See,
Double whammy of error.
Zero frame of reference to know how to pronounce the director's name, so you'll have to enlighten me.
Well, I've been saying Dellamorte Dellamore, and it's not. It's Dellamorte Dellamore.
Which I'm pretty sure they say in the film.
They do say it in the film, and it's not a first watch. I know, I'm dumb. I get it. And the director, of course, is Michele Soavi.
Michele, okay.
Michele.
I could work out Suave, but I was like,
yeah.
Michelle.
Well, this is... that's what I've been saying, Michelle or Michele. I don't fucking know. I'm not Italian. Some of my family in the past, I have Italian heritage. I've been there once. I like pasta, but that's the extent.
I've seen Italy in pictures.
I literally have red wine right in front of me now that may have originated in Italy. Who knows?
You mean red wine,
Yeah, let's go with that.
It's Italian, therefore it's called red wine,
I was trying to think of something better, but no. You've won that one.
Nothing is better than that. We've peaked. We may as well finish the episode now.
7 minutes in, we've peaked with red wine, This does not bode well. Good Lord. So, before I get sick of the sound of my own voice, which we're already edging to that point, if I'm perfectly honest, I would like to just take a couple minutes to read out some feedback that we got. And we got it back in February, but we're awful. So we haven't done anything about it until now because life happened and yada, yada, yada. But it was really interesting. And it was about a film that you and I covered not so long ago, which was Cannibal Holocaust.
Don't remind me.
I know, sorry. Probably one of my favourite recent shows, though. So I just want to read this out. This is from a guy called Dave, who I don't know who he is. I don't know if he's a regular listener or if he perhaps just has a very invested interest in Cannibal Holocaust and stumbled on our show. But if you are listening, Dave, thank you so much for getting in touch. It was kind of a dream to read and very informative, so I'm going to share it with you now. Hey all at RGP HQ. I'm currently backtracking through your catalogue, and as an avid splatter horror viewer and Fangoria subscriber back in the early 80s, had to get in touch about Cannibal Holocaust. It's almost impossible now to perceive, in our age of unrelenting, perma-available content, the jolting shock and full-bodied blow of seeing an unedited pre-certification VHS of Cannibal Holocaust coming at you from out of nowhere. This was an immersive experience that can only truly be appreciated if you were living in the environment at the time. The time being 1982, and the UK's still a net curtain nation of 3-channel TV, light entertainment, and fluffy, fuzzy medium wave radio. Sounds great, to be honest. I was 16 and finishing my last year of school in 1982. Home video viewing was still in its infancy, so being teenage boys, if anyone's parents were ever out or at work, and a few of us had bunked off of school, we'd gather together to watch any film guaranteed to put the frighteners on us. A tick list of must-sees included The Exorcist, Driller Killer, I Spit on Your Grave, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Clockwork Orange, Straw Dogs, Maniac, Southern Comfort, Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, and Last House on the Left. Cannibal Holocaust was so unheard of and deep in the cinematic shadows in 1982 it was never mentioned or even appeared on anyone's list of videos to select or swerve. But it was a film that literally fell into my lap. I was on a double date at my then girlfriend's house with her sister and her sister's boyfriend. The girl's parents were off out for a polite Sunday evening drink, and being the owners of a newly acquired VHS player, had rented a video for us to watch. God knows why this title, though, as they were usually such suburban, straight arrow, upright types, but there it was. Cannibal Holocaust had been hired for our viewing pleasure. I mean, pleasure? Not one of us. Yeah. Not one of us had heard of the film. In fact, it was entirely unknown to everyone I knew in 82, and from the cover art, the worst we were expecting was some cheapo flick ripping off Piranha, Caligula, or some other shoddy schlockbuster, so had no concept or clue of the grim trip ahead. As the film descended into those infamous scenes of Mondo-esque realism, we were all bug-eyed, fidgeting and twitching, left silent and shaken, with stomachs spinning and heads reeling when the credits eventually rolled. The next day, I had to share and relate the salty scenes to my teenage mates, almost as a way of processing the bizarre lo-fi film-within-a-film faux realism. Important to remember too, this was in a contrary age of Mary Whitehouse and Margaret Thatcher starch-collar puritanism that eventually led to edits, bannings, and the video nasty crusades, while exploitation movies like Death Wish, The Exterminator, and Ms. 45 were given cinematic general releases that would slip into the mainstream without any protests or parental raised eyebrows, and were generally regarded as cult viewing. But like anyone who'd seen this cannibalistic bloody bolt out of the Amazon in the early 80s, word of mouth created a gathering traction and escalating infamy, also assisted by the political climate of the time. The Falklands War, US secret forces fighting Latin dictatorships, death squads, dirty wars, and the disappeared, all added to the lawless mood and urban myths of what went on in South America, where life was cheap and the whispers and knowing nods would have you believe actual snuff films were in circulation. Diodato cultivated the temperature and tone of this sensationalist chatter, using it as source material for a contextual setting. As you touch on in the podcast, his cinematic trick was to mix mediums, actual news footage with repulsively real animal killings, and the use of location filming and indigenous people. Even the contrasting soundtracks, a mellow spaghetti western style theme, but doomy budget synth stabs in the grimmest moments. As a viewer, after being confronted with the awful scenes of actual animal slaughter, the shaky snatches of human mutilation and castration seemed all too real. The grotty logic being, if they're prepared to slaughter animals, it follows these butchery scenes could also be real. We were in more naive times then, and before the widescreen genius of FX specialists like Savini, Baker, and Bottin went mainstream and changed horror forever. 40 years after the film's release, nothing will ever shake me like the bare-knuckle thump and wide-eyed ride of seeing a then-unknown exercise in cinematic mock realism decades before our pre-revisionist age. For all its questionable ethics, Cannibal Holocaust is still as notorious as ever, remains a potent, powerful piece of filmmaking that raises and reflects as many, if not more, moral debates today as it did in the early 80s. Hope this helps to convey those disquieting vibes of the times. Dave.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Isn't it just? I'm like I said, I'm already sick of the sound of my own voice, but I really wanted to share that because obviously something that we touched on during the show is, I guess, this general sense of wonder, what it would be like to have seen something without the prior knowledge. And it's something that we will never experience. We'll never get that. And that sort of makes me kind of sad in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also, it's very easy to sit in this sort of environment and go, oh, it's really cheap looking. Oh, it's this, like that, and write everything off because we've had the hindsight of kind of more kind of realistic looking, effectively, special effects. And to actually hear someone who was around at the time and actually watched it at the time, it goes to show that actually these films did have a massive impact on people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really interesting to hear him say, actually, back up the theory that by including the animal killings, it made everything else seem a little bit more real. Yeah,
I think we kind of touched on that.
Yeah, but I think that to me is the only reason to justify the inclusion of them. So it's interesting to know that was effective.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
And guys, just so you know, we do read our emails. So if you have any, if you have any comments, you might
be 2 months late. but we get there.
You might find yourself, your email being read out on an episode of Radio Gorepress.
Dellamorte Dellamore.
Dellamorte Dellamore.
Because I've just talked for about 18 minutes without stopping, I'm going to defer to you for a synopsis, Phil.
I will take on that challenge. And by challenge, I mean reading from Google. Something is causing the dead to rise from their graves as flesh-eating zombies, and cemetery custodian Francesco Dellamorte grows tired of killing them all for the second time. However, the town politicians won't listen to him, so Francesco is on his own. One day, he falls for a beautiful woman whose husband has recently died, but their affair is tragically interrupted by zombies, sending Francesco into a tailspin of madness and woe, which makes the film sound far more dramatic than it actually is.
Do you not think it's dramatic?
I mean, it's there is elements of drama. I think it's a bit funnier than that.
Okay, I feel like straight off the bat, we talked for about a minute before we started recording, but I'm starting to get the impression we're going to have very different readings on this film.
Which, good thing. Good thing. Be boring if we agreed on everything.
This is very true. There I go, agreeing. Uh-oh.
It's got boring, Sarah. I disagree.
Thank you. So this wasn't a first time watch for you, was it?
It was.
You've seen this? Oh, it was.
It was a first time watch, yeah. Well, and that's an interesting thing because I've known you for like 13, 14 years now. And I'm pretty sure, it's getting on. And I'm pretty sure I've known this film to be kind of on your top 5, top 10 list as long as I've known you.
Oh, I'll be honest, it wouldn't make my top 10.
Okay, well maybe you've seen fewer films when I knew you.
I'd only seen 10 films back then.
I certainly know this film from having spoken to you.
Oh, that's interesting. I do remember getting obsessed with it the first time I saw it.
Okay.
Which I hadn't realised was that long ago, actually. That's making me feel exceptionally old. I thought I came to this film quite late, but no, you're probably right. It probably was back in the IMDb sandbox
era
days. Do you know what? I'm gonna reflect. I can't talk.
Reflect.
Excuse me. Can I put the words back in and start again? I'm going to change the phrase. Instead of salad days, it's now sandbox days.
I know.
Can we get that out into the popular vernacular, please?
And it would only
tell everyone. And
the reference would only be picked up on by 5 people.
Yeah, probably. There was about 15 of us who were on it daily, and that's it. Everybody else had lives. Mm-hmm. So before we delve too deep into symbolism and meanings and whatever else, something that I didn't know until this viewing, when I actively started to do a little bit more research, is that it was based on a novel by an author called Tiziano Sclavi. And apparently, I think he also... Oh, God, I should have double-checked this before I started recording. So, effectively, it's supposed to be like connected to the comic Dylan Dog. Yep. Which I only know about because there was a movie adaptation of that, I believe, with Brandon Routh.
Brandon Routh, yeah. I looked it up beforehand.
Okay. I don't know. I can't remember if the novel and the comic were written by the same guy, but I know that the main character in Dylan Dog was actually based on Rupert Everett prior to Dellamorte Dellamore existing, which is crazy.
Like, I wrote that down too, and it goes to show that, like, I don't know, it must have been such a fanboy moment for him to know that a film being produced based on his work starred an actor who he'd based another character on.
That's nuts. That's like dream casting. I want to know how that came about. And actually, I saw a short interview with Rupert Everett. I think it was for the BFI a few years ago. And he talks about this film really fondly, which I love. He seemed to have a good experience making it, and he spoke really highly of the director and just the process, and he kind of considers it like a genius project.
Okay.
So I really like that, because I think you can tell if somebody's not invested in a project that they're a part of.
Yeah.
So it's nice that even all these years later, this sort of bizarre, low-budget Italian horror film that didn't do brilliantly but has amassed a cult following, that he still looks back fondly and thinks really highly of this thing that he was a part of. I think that's super cool.
And certainly from the outside, like watching this film and kind of is the juxtaposition of this like low-budget comedy horror, Italian comedy horror, starring famed English actor Rupert Everett. There's just such a clash of worlds there, and it makes just the whole viewing experience so much more bizarre.
I would definitely agree. I remember the first time I watched this, and I was just like, "Wait, who's the star?"
Because he was already famous. He'd already had he was already a well-known actor, and then to star in this kind of low budget Italian horror.
Which makes me feel like perhaps they approached him first, and specifically because of the tie-in with the comic.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they pitched it to him that way and were just like, nobody else can fulfill this role. Please, 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 with a cherry on top. I feel like that would be a difficult proposition to turn down for any actor.
Yeah, particularly like knowing that, obviously I know Tiziano Sclavi, didn't have much involvement within the screenplay of the film.
Okay.
He basically handed it over to, how did we decide to pronounce it?
Michele Soave.
Michele Soave. Handed it over to him, and he and his friend, or the other screenwriter, wrote the actual script for it.
That's interesting. So, I mean, maybe Michele was like a fan? I mean, he must have been a fan of the source material, right?
You'd have thought so, wouldn't you? He's taken that on kind of...
Yeah, like it's a strange premise, and he's filmed it so lovingly. One complaint that I hear levied at this film quite a lot is that the plot is too messy and meandering. Okay. And actually, in the interview that I saw with Rupert Everett, the way he justifies that is that because it's supposed to be a bit pulpy.
Yeah. So I can see that.
Yeah, if you imagine the scenes or the set pieces rather, as like comic strips, then actually the film makes a lot more sense. It's almost like a comic book come to life. Much like a returner. There we go. I made a connection.
Excellently done.
It's the best I can do. What I will say is that I had never really understood my mum's crush on Rupert Everett until this film.
Really?
I get it.
He's very like dashing, isn't he? Like with kind of like loose billowing cotton tops and pining around a cemetery at night.
He's a bit foppish, but like not in a Hugh Grant annoying way.
Yeah, in a kind of melodramatic, silly, gothic sort of way.
Like in a Bauhaus music video kind of a way.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. I want to hear more from you, because I honestly was so convinced that you'd seen this film before, first off. So I'm really intrigued by first-time viewer opinions.
I think I would have... This is a film that probably deserves multiple watches to appreciate, because
I definitely agree.
I think in my first watch, I got super swept up in, for want of a better word, the silliness of it and the humor.
Oh, it is very silly.
And kind of... You kind of hinted at beforehand. We spoke a bit about it beforehand, and I perhaps made the mistake of saying it was quite, bad word, but quite a superficial movie, in the sense that it's very And I appreciate that's probably not the case, but I think it's probably because I got so caught up in just how weird and bonkers it was, and the comedy of it, that I neglected as I was going through it to think further about what the film actually means. And on a second viewing, now that I know exactly what I'd be getting into by watching it, I can appreciate it. I would be able to appreciate it more, I would say. I get you.
And I do understand that, actually, because I think, to me, also, that's sort of a testament of a good film.
For
the
sure.
fact that you can watch it and accept it on a tertiary level, and then, if you want to, go back for multiple viewings and try and, like, discern deeper meanings and figure out the symbolism, which is kind of what I was doing this time around, because I'm always convinced there's more going on. And I know some of the time it's just me reading into nothing. Arbitrary directorial choices that I'm ascribing meaning to.
That's art, right? Art
exactly.
Isn't necessarily
open to interpretation.
Right or wrong, but yeah, it allows the viewer to, or the audience to, confront the medium they're consuming and work through it and work out what they think it means, regardless
project
of whether
their own shit on it.
Yeah. Or to put it that way, yes.
I think they used red in this scene because of they just wanted red. It's fine.
GCSE English.
Yeah. I've got to put those hard-won GCSEs to work somehow.
I'm still riding a high of when my English teacher complimented me for picking up on a good metaphor in a book.
Did you?
Yeah, it was.
Well done.
I can't remember what book it was, but it was the main character went into a kind of the mansion of a local rich person. I'm not sure who it was, and the author described a fountain where the water was spilling over onto the patio, and I was like, oh, it's like their money, and how the money is just, they don't care about wasting water. And yeah, I got complimented by my English teacher, and that was 15 years ago.
I don't remember anything positive about English classes, apart from when they ended. My favourite bit was when they were over.
I think we have very different experiences of English class.
Me too. Yeah, probably of school.
Fair.
Couldn't wait to leave. So, at its heart, this is a zombie film.
Yes.
I kind of hesitate to put it in the same bracket as most zombie films. However, it does have things in common with the Romero world. It even has things in common with, like, early Peter Jackson, I would say.
So funny you should mention that. I was literally just thinking about Peter Jackson because this film feels a lot older than it actually is.
Do you think?
I don't know if it's a low budget movie, but if whether it's because it's a low budget movie.
Yeah.
But if I'd have watched this devoid of context, I would have gone, yeah, that's like 70s, 80s.
Would you?
Yeah.
As old as 70s? Oh, wow.
Maybe not that far, but a lot earlier than kind of like mid 90s.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about something
it's
like
three years before Titanic.
Yeah, like the Matrix was 99.
Oh, don't.
I'm pretty sure the
that's
Matrix.
true.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a 90s movie. And I feel the same way about something like Brain Dead or Bad Taste. They are late 80s, early 90s, but they feel older somehow. And I think it might just be the budget thing.
I think you're probably right. I think I have no idea how this. I mean, I don't understand how film stock works. I don't get it. I know that. I know the transfer of this film that's widely available is a bit shit.
Okay.
I've heard that talked about in several places. Apparently, I'm gonna say some words. I don't fully know what they mean. Be warned.
Help where I can.
much like everything that comes out of my mouth, I might not be sure of what they mean. So something to do with the way that it was compressed for different countries, different formats. So the transfer that's available on Prime, for example, which is probably, I'm guessing, where you watched it.
That was the one I watched, yep.
And the one that's available, I think Shameless are responsible for the DVD and Blu-ray release in the UK.
Shameless were actually credited at the start of the Prime version as well.
Were they?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it would have been the same version.
You search Cemetery Man on Prime, and the Church came up as well, which I think is another Shameless.
Oh yes, that's Michele Soave as well.
Okay.
One that I bought a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Before I knew we were doing this week. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm very keen to after this. So yeah, something to do with kind of the transfer and frame rates. So apparently in the version that we both watched, there are certain kind of panning, like tracking shots that kind of judder a little bit. I didn't notice it too much, I'll be honest, until I like read about it. But I'm wondering if that kind of makes it look a little bit cheaper, if that perhaps affects that as well.
Maybe. Yeah, I wouldn't know enough. I know different, sort of, certainly in America, I think the standard is something like 30 or 29.97 frames a second or something like that.
Yeah.
It's something weird. And we get 24 or 25, I think. And so, yeah, maybe the kind of like...
why do they get more frames? Shall we start a change.org petition for more frames?
We want more frames.
When do we want them? Yesterday.
94 apparently.
Yeah, 1993. I'm going off one of the gravestones.
Oh, okay. IMDb had it as 94. So
yeah, I think it came out in 94.
Okay.
I noticed because, like you say, it did look quite dated. I will agree with that. And there were points at which I was like, maybe wondering if it was a period piece. I wondered if perhaps that was intentional. Perhaps it was the time period was a little bit anachronistic on purpose.
I think, I think like it points to Francesca's character as well, like the fact that he's driving like a VW Beetle, and you know that is a film that is almost entrenched in kind of the earlier, kind of the 80s and 70s, I suppose.
Yeah, but then there's the woman that always visits them in the churchyard, in the cemetery, the older lady, when she finally passes away, and you see the gravestone with the two pictures on that she talked about, and it says 1993. So they do kind of date it as being present day, which is curious.
Yeah.
But I do agree, it does look a little bit older. Like if you told me it was mid-80s, it wouldn't have batted an eyelid.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
I suspect that probably is budget. So going back to the influences and the fact that this is technically a zombie movie, but perhaps not, like we see the influences like Romero, Peter Jackson, even Evil Dead, It's even got stuff in common with Evil Dead. How do you feel about the zombies and how they were presented? Because they were like reasonably traditional, sort of shuffling. The makeup was kind of early Savini-esque.
I like them. I'm not I've watched a fair few zombie movies. Can't say I've watched a ton. But they felt quite original. I really liked the use of like plant growth.
Yes.
Like as unrealistic as it would be, but just having like bits of plant growing out of everyone, like roots and stuff. It just gave them a bit of texture, I suppose. And yeah, it was a really nice touch.
It's interesting you should mention that, actually, because one of the notes that I made is that so Soavi himself said that the zombies get their energy, or they are kind of resurrected by the mandragola roots.
Yes, I heard that.
So there is this huge connection to the natural world. The whole film is basically natural versus unnatural, living versus dead. What's the difference? The lines are all a bit blurred. And the idea of duality is there throughout.
Well, I mean, that's literally the name of the film, right?
Yeah.
Dellamorte Dellamore is of death and of love.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to this later on. Don't let me forget. But I don't want to blow my load about my theory just yet.
We've already peaked 7 minutes in with red wine, so
red wine, which I'm going to have a sip of. Very winey. So apparently some of the I can't talk today. This is terrible. Help me out.
I wish I could, but I've got no idea what you're going to say.
Well, do you know what? I think the biggest metaphor for me presenting this podcast is Nagi trying to sweep leaves in the wind.
Bless him.
That's literally me trying to present a podcast in 2021. There we go. I brought it back.
Hey, there we go. Proud of you.
So what do you think of the characterization? What do you think of Francesco, I think. And Nagi, obviously, are two sort of principal characters.
Yeah, I really like them. I think I think Francesco was perfectly done. I think the idea of like, if you're gonna have a guy sweeping around a graveyard at night, he's gonna be this kind of like very Byronic kind of figure. Even if he doesn't, he reads 2 books or whatever, so I think that was kind of exactly where it should be. I was quite surprised with Nagi. I think there's a tendency to, in some films with like mentally handicapped people, to go very dark with that, and I was a little worried that was going to happen.
Okay. In what sense? What do you mean by dark?
Well, like when he threw up over the mayor's daughter, like that felt a bit like a warning flag to me about a direction they could have taken. Unfortunately, it remained very light, and actually was all fairly innocent, which was a pleasant surprise. I think if certainly in kind of other not other exploitation movies, but some exploitation movies of kind of the 80s and 70s, they perhaps would have gone darker with that. But yeah, it remained quite innocent, which I really appreciated.
I think I know what you're talking about.
I didn't want to squirm at that scene. I didn't want to squirm at anything.
Yeah, I think taking it back to Deodato for a second.
Okay.
I think it's oh god, is it House on the Edge of the Park? There's a film called House on the Edge of the Park. There's a film called House by the Cemetery, and I always get them mixed up. The one starring David Hess.
There was a house somewhere.
It's by something, okay? Give me a break.
And Jack Belton.
Yeah, oh no. Don't complicate it further. Matt Dillon wasn't in it. So it's a Deodato film, and it's horrible. It's really horrible.
Okay.
It's about 2 guys who meet a bunch of like stuck-up rich socialites and just torture them. They break into the house and they just torture them. But David Hess's kind of sidekick is I never know what to say. I always try to be delicate, and I swing too far into political correctness, and it kind of comes out the other side of that and ends up offensive again. So I think I'm too diplomatic sometimes. His mental acuity is not what it should be.
Okay.
And he's played in quite a cartoonish, borderline insulting way. And while he has a conscience, does some awful things.
Yeah.
And he's kind of taken advantage of. And I would say the same thing about I Spit on Your Grave. I think, is it Matthew, the guy with the glasses? And he's sort of coerced into raping Camille Keaton's character. He doesn't really want to, but again, he's sort of easily led. So I think I know what you mean when you say it could have gone darker.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean.
Right. Okay.
Having like a low budget Italian horror, kind of, especially since the Shameless company has been the one who's kind of distributing it. It felt like, not knowing exactly the type of film it was. Yeah.
I think that's a fair sort of assumption to have made. I get you.
But yeah, it was a relief in a way, and I think it's the only way it could have gone. It's not that sort of film, right? It is it is quite a light-hearted movie in that.
In some respects, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very comedic, intentionally comedic.
Yes, that's that. Yeah, exactly. I
really like Nagi. I think this film sort of covers every facet to love imaginable. And I think Nagi has like the purest love story out of everyone. It's fucked up. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of the sweetest.
I think if you're going to have a film where the dead are coming back to life, that's probably the kind of most innocent, sweet way you can take that, you know?
Yeah. And I think like seeing a zombie head inside an empty TV is quite the visual.
I'm going
to be honest. That was kind of great.
So many like favorite lines written down on my notes, and one of them is just, "What are you doing on TV?" Like, yeah, write that down. That's perfect.
See, so we'll come back to this in a second. But Anna Falchi's character, what characters should I say? As she. The idea of doppelgangers, which I want to talk about in a sec. Okay. But I think one of the lines, the first time he meets her, is effectively at a funeral at his cemetery. She is grieving the death of her husband.
Not father.
Not father, yeah. So that's like the first element, mourning, grief. Like you mourn things that you loved. But also, I think one of the first things he says to sort of try and seduce her, he talks about an ossuary, and she's like, "An ossuary?" I'm like, "Yes, girl, yes. Well, do it for me too."
Yeah. Well, like again, they kind of like it fits in that same aesthetic that Francesco's in that very kind of romantic in a very traditional Gothic sense, and you know, it's. Yeah, like that perfect blend of love and death, and yeah, the
backlighting, the blues, the whites. It basically looks like a Bonnie Tyler music video barfed all over this film, and I love it. That's not a criticism.
That does not surprise me.
Like billowing hair and like cloth. Exactly. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So. How do you feel about their love story? I hesitate to use the phrase love story because it's so strange.
Yeah, it's very strange. I think, again, like, knowing the type of movie it was, and I think as this was happening, I was getting a sense of what it was. I think I just accepted that I would need to just roll with whatever was going on.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment.
And, like, she's just kind of having sex on her dead husband's grave, and
that's the most goth thing imaginable, by the way.
You know, and I think silly, unrealistic, whatever, like I'm happy just accepting it as it sort of on face value there. It is bizarre that it happens so quickly and in the way that it does, but fine, you know, whatever. But then people do process grief in different ways, and it's quite a common thing. So reading into that too much, maybe.
Sometimes they process it with their vagina.
Yes, exactly.
I felt like that's where you were going. I thought I'd finish the sentence for you. So I've heard quite a few people talk about this scene, and everybody seems to think it's quite sexy.
Okay.
Am I alone in not finding this to be a sexy film?
I don't.
I mean, some of it's erotic, but that's not the same as sexy.
Yeah. I think it's a bit too campy to be sexy.
It's too comedic. Yeah. It's a comedy.
Like, you can throw all the boobs and stuff as much as you want in there, but if the tone isn't there, then it's not gonna be played for to turn people on, you know.
Well, it worked. Well, whether that was their intention or not, apparently it did the trick for some people. And some of the articles I read, I do believe Anna Falchi's boobs made the top 10 boobs of something. I don't know.
I was going to mention that as well.
I stopped reading because, oh my God, the misogyny. Yeah. Can we not?
Yes, that's why I didn't make any notes. But yeah, I read the same thing.
Ugh. Nothing about her acting. Just, tits.
Just the boobs.
So, this is what I was going to say a second ago before I mangled my sentence. So apparently they learned nothing from Poltergeist, and they built the sets of the cemetery on real abandoned cemetery. What? What?
Indeed, they moved some of the bones, I think, in the ossuary scene. I think I read they moved some of the bones, but then the crew got
Haunted?
they got haunted and they put them back.
Oh, wow. I was joking.
No, I'm pretty sure I read that was that's the case.
Wow. I mean, nothing less than they deserve. Don't move bones. Although, the mistake they made in Poltergeist was just moving the headstones. So maybe they did learn from that.
And still got it wrong.
I still got it wrong.
I was quite... So here we go. The ossuary that was used in the film was quite real. Supposedly, one of the crew members removed some of the bones from the ossuary during filming, but quickly replaced them the next day, claiming to have encountered an angry ghost following the removal of the bones.
You fucking nana. What are they doing?
Are you telling me you wouldn't steal a genuine human skull or something from an ossuary?
I don't think I could. To
be fair, I'm not sure I could either, but as much as it would be kind of cool. I'm like that's a real person. No.
Don't get me wrong. A dream item for my home is a genuine human skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that. But I'm not going to nick one from a cemetery. I have some standards and some morals, and that would fall into the not acceptable category.
That's fair. And you might get haunted by an angry ghost.
And I might get haunted. I might get haunted anyway if I get a skeleton through official means. I'm never going to have one. They're so expensive.
Means. Oh, of course you've looked them up.
I have. They're about $3,000, Phil.
Wow.
I don't have that kind of money for bones. It would be cheaper to go and murder someone. And then
financially, probably.
And then hire Harvey Keitel to help me clean up the crime. And then mount the skeleton in my front room. That would probably be... He just phone adverts crime. Now. I'm sure he'd do it for £100 in a sandwich. Anyway, that's my backup plan.
Okay. Noted.
I'm not going to nick one.
I think it makes me wonder, because obviously this film is an English language film.
Mm-hmm.
It seems...
Which is interesting because, sorry to cut you off there, I'm used to seeing films like this with a lot more dubbing.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly what I was going to get at. Cannibal Holocaust, we mentioned it. There's a lot of films in which clearly actors who are not speaking English at all or speaking English fairly poorly are dubbed. And this, for the most part, is actually, whether it was dubbed or not, is actually really well done.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's not without some of the same sound issues that those sorts of Italian horrors do stumble into. But it's definitely one of the better examples. I love a bit of dubbing.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love Italian horror anyway. I find that sort of really bad dubbing to be quite charming. So that's not usually a problem for me. But I did notice that this was largely absent.
Yeah, and it made me wonder, to the extent that I wondered whether some of the actors were genuinely, I just could speak English really well,
I think that was the impression I got, yeah.
Because I can't remember his name. What was Francesco's only friend called who worked in... Franco. Yeah, he his accent was spot on. And I don't know if he is... It kind of has grown up in England or something, but yeah.
But I don't know, but I am going to talk about Franco quite a bit in a minute. It's my one theory.
I saw that smirk, and I was like, "What are you about to say?" But what I was going to get at is that, and it sounds really patronising. I'm aware it sounds patronising, but I was impressed how witty this film was for saying it was written in a language that wasn't the director's native tongue.
Yeah,
I know a lot of comedies it kind of transcends language, but. Yeah, there were some really sort of clever, funny lines.
So I think I think I understand what you mean. You would expect more sort of visual comedy, but actually there was a lot more written, verbal
not
comedy
necessarily
than you expected.
wordplay, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I think that must be quite a hard task to do if you're native, if you're not using your native language.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I think it's quite impressive, actually. And
exactly.
just while we're on the subject, the scene in the ossuary was something that kind of stuck out to me and was a point that Rosie found as well. Obviously, Rosie can't be with us tonight. She's not feeling too well. But I did ask for her input before we started recording because I thought it'd be nice to include her. And one of the main points that she discerned was the kiss in the ossuary, the first kiss. I mean, it's really fucking weird if you don't know what's going on. But she kind of throws the cloth over his face and says, I'll kiss you like this. And they kiss through material. And it's really fucking weird. But immediately, and I know very little about classical art. It's not really my forte. But even I was just like, it looks like I know there's a painting called The Lovers. And I know that because Rosie's kind of referenced it before. By Renee Magritte. And apparently she says shrouded faces are something that he did quite a lot. And despite him denying it, a lot of people hypothesized that it was a sort of memento mori of his mother who drowned herself. He was there when she was pulled from the water and her nightgown was wrapped around her face.
Oh, that's tragic.
It's dark, isn't it? But I mean, there's a lot of memento mori imagery in this film. Just a lot of the skulls, like very, very strong memento mori. I mean, it's in a cemetery. It deals with death, of course. But I thought it was done particularly well. I thought the set dressing was interesting and there was always a lot to look at.
Speaking of set dressing, though, I was surprised to find out that the ossuary was a real ossuary because everything it felt kind of dressed, as it were. Like
it looked like somebody had thrown around those fake spiders webs that you get at Halloween.
Like just stuck plastic skeletons on the walls. Like I mean, don't get me wrong, I haven't really got many experiences with ossuaries, but knowing the Paris catacombs, Sedlec ossuary.
I've been there.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal.
Crypt down the road from here. Everything I've seen of them feels like everything's quite respectfully organised and decorated. Whereas this was just like Halloween decorations on walls, job done. And it was so, and particularly with the flooding as well, the whole place being flooded. It just felt very dramatically dressed, to make it as kind of gothic as they could,
Yeah, I agree. I think I've only been to 2 ossuaries, but the 2 that I've been to were very ordered. Like you say, very organised, very ordered, because there's a level of respect for the dead there.
Of course, yeah.
You're not supposed to touch things because obviously the more you touch bones, like the shinier they get, they wear away. So they discourage things like that. It definitely wasn't like Hythe Ossuary because there was a dog there, so that beats all others. If there's a dog anywhere, it automatically makes it the best place. Yeah. And also there was a guy talking about how, look at the jaws. They've got all their teeth. Wouldn't happen today. It's just like, that sounded personal. Back off, dude. Yeah. I've had a few fillings.
Having a go.
Hop off my dick. But yeah, no, you're right. It did seem like
again, music video.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
straight out of like Meatloaf.
I was hesitating to say the word disrespectful. I probably should have hesitated because apparently I can't pronounce it. But I guess they were, if they were like just moving bones around. That's kind of a dick move.
And maybe that is why. Maybe it was sort of set dressed, as it were.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, it's just one of the notes I wrote down. Yeah.
I will say I did, to go back to Nagi and quotes that stood out. I definitely related to Nagi more than any other character in this film, just because he was a walking disaster. And I feel like there was a line, a point at which Francesco said, "If you finish fast, I'll buy you an ice cream."
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to God, if there's one thing that will motivate me, it's the promise of ice cream.
What about the line, "The only thing that's not shitty is sleep"? I thought that would appeal to you.
Yeah, hell yeah.
It's like, I hear that.
Well, no, if they change the line to "the only things that aren't shitty are sleep and ice cream."
And cats.
I can live without cats. Cats are jerks. But ice cream, now we're talking.
Ice cream is forever.
So here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of your favourite visual moments? Because if there's one thing this film does well, it's memorable visuals, I think, anyway.
One of the ones that stood out were the smash cut between Francesco saying, "I'd give my life to be dead."
Mm-hmm.
Straight
Great line.
Smash cut to Nagy just patting down a grave he's just finished filling. It lasts for a second. Nagy moves away, and you see Francesco walking behind him. But just that kind of like edit was so smart.
Some of the editing in this is actually like really, really on point. I thought, not just the visuals, but yes, the editing as well. Kind of genius in places.
I loved Claudio's eye socket when he'd been risen.
Yep.
This light blinking in his eye socket. That was really cool. And also him riding out of his grave on a motorbike.
Oh my
Amazing.
God, that's my favourite point.
The chompy Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Love it. And just the reaction shot of a horse at one point.
What was your favourite thing about this film? A reaction shot of a horse.
My note just reads, more films should have reaction shots of horses. It just felt so like out of the blue.
Black Beauty, Seabiscuit. I'm sure there's loads more. Warhorse.
So yeah, there are plenty of kind of very iconic moments in this movie.
I think my favourites are, as I said, the head inside a TV.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Like you said, the motorcycle bursting out of the grave.
Meatloaf would be proud.
Fucking hell, that was brilliant. It was brilliant. And it was so 80s hair metal.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. And also, I really loved the devil. Or the devil, like the Grim Reaper.
The Grim Reaper, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was done brilliantly. It looked so cool.
No, I hadn't, I'd forgotten about it. Like, I didn't write it down, but yeah, it was a really effective puppet. And I think there was something about its movement that felt really unnatural. It was really, really well done.
I like that a lot. And I'll be honest, given that it's super memorable, I'd forgotten about it until I watched it again.
Yeah, I watched the trailer because wanted to know what I was getting myself in for, and he makes an appearance.
Just go in blind.
Yeah, he makes himself known in that, and I'd seen it in the trailer and the film as well. But I think because I didn't write it down, it didn't jump to mind. But yeah, it was really well done. Really well done.
Okay. So going back to Anna Falchi.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any theories on what the fuck is going on?
Not a one. I think, like I said,
Okay.
had I watched this movie again, I might have had some time to percolate and actually looked into it a little bit more, because I wasn't expecting her to turn up a second and then third time. And clearly there is something there, because she talks about having kind of feeling like she's known Francesco for forever and all sorts. So there is something at play there. However, like I said, hadn't really had any theories, but I feel you do. So
I do, but I don't really want to I
but
can't
I don't
really delve
say.
into it. Well, no, I can't delve into it until I talk about my overall theory, which
Interesting.
is not worth mentioning until the end.
Okay.
So a quick point I did want to bring up is apparently it's Michele Soave says it's intended to be a critique on like the corruption that happens in small Italian towns and villages.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know a thing about Italian politics, so I've only got his word for that. Did you get any sense of sort of a higher political or like socio-political meaning?
I mean, not overtly. I mean, there was obviously the scene where Francesca was appealing to the mayor, and the mayor was too busy doing mayoral things to listen to him.
And that actually, no, the one thing that did sort of clue me in that there might be a political commentary was the point at which the mayor's daughter is obviously buried in the cemetery, and her dad comes with a camera crew with the intention of digging her up.
Yeah,
and he's so unemotional, and he's literally just using the experience as an excuse to get re-elected. Yeah. Which is certainly shows the politicians to be very crass and self-serving. So I guess maybe it is more obvious than I thought.
Yeah, I think perhaps, you know, having if I knew of a situation like that, it would have been more obvious, I think. But I think we're just too far removed from, because it's not just like a cemetery in a small town. It's a cemetery in a small town in Italy. You know, and there's a lot of steps of removal there from where we're at.
What I will say, I don't actually know where it was filmed. Don't say Italy. Don't be that guy. What I will say is that it looks gorgeous wherever it was filmed. And there was a point at which I paused it and I was taking photos and I was trying to compare them, because there's a piazza that looks almost identical to the one that was in Call Me By Your Name. I don't think it was the same one.
Okay.
Or I couldn't find confirmation of it being the same one. Anyway, put it that way. But yeah, I want to go to Italy. Can we travel again?
I don't think I'm in charge of that.
Oh, you can't provide me with my vaccine passport?
Afraid not, I'm afraid.
What am I doing talking to you for an hour then? Fuck's sake, what a waste.
That's your game, is it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to butter you up so I can get on a plane. That's how this works. So, going back to kind of like symbolism, the idea, I mean, as you said, it's in the title, of death, of love. Eros, Thanatos, the ideas of love and death are explored in a very comedic way, but quite extensively. And I think, like I said earlier, I think all aspects of love are presented. Like you have grief, mourning, heartbreak, lost, love at first sight, the idea of true love and soulmates. Literally every kind of facet of love is explored in some way. And I think that's really interesting. That doesn't happen a lot in horror.
Yeah, I think that fits with. I think that's why I think the film couldn't have. Don't think it would have worked as well if it had any other like aesthetic to it than the one it has. Because again, like the idea of love and romance being tied with death is such a gothic concept, and I've mentioned it before. And so having these figures, these kind of like two figures romping around in graveyards at night, and, you know, like it's so very specific to that aesthetic, really, you know. It's
a bit like Harlequin romance cover. Is that like the cover of a shitty sort of pulpy romance novel, where the male has long flowing hair and a white shirt that's billowing open robe, to the navel. And is lamenting death and wanting to die. And and he writes poetry in his spare time.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's such a Byronic figure, you know.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. But I think that also sort of lends it more of a comedic angle as well, or to maybe to folks like you and I that are perhaps a little bit more cynical. It certainly reads as funny to me. Like it doesn't read as romantic ideal or as sexy in any way. It adds a layer of funny. Yeah,
but I don't think that negates the not cleverness per se, but just the extent by which they explore different themes and different ideas of love.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'd be interested to know whether or not like this sort of dreamy, kind of corny aspect of it was intentional, or whether it was just
a
budget
constraints
budget,
and
and that like they were just a little bit behind the times.
I think it, knowing how specific they are with, like he does have long flowing hair and a white open kind of blouse almost, you know. It's so specific, you know. I think it must be deliberate. Must be. Everything,
Probably.
Lots of like flowing fabric in the wind and, you know, dramatic lighting and all sorts, you know.
Which, interestingly, sort of lends more weight to my theory.
Okay, do you want to explore? You've hinted at it enough.
Go on. Okay, I don't have very many notes left, so
me neither, to be honest.
Go for it.
A good time to wrap up more than anything.
So this was, I think, maybe a third or fourth watch for me. I think like a fourth watch, but I hadn't seen it in maybe 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it had been long enough that I'd forgotten enough of it that it felt fresh. And it's the first time I've really watched it with a critical podcast view in mind.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of letting it wash over me like I do with most movies. So this is the first time that this has occurred to me. But so I don't know if this is correct. My read on the film is that none of it actually happens.
It's all a collective hallucination that we've all experienced.
So, I don't think Francesco is the main character. I think Franco is the main character.
Okay.
I think
interesting. Tinfoil hat time. I love it.
I think he's been in this coma in the hospital the whole time.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, exploring like themes of duality and doppelgangers.
Yeah.
I think Francesco and Nagi are basically like the angel and the devil on his shoulder.
Uh-huh.
I think one is pure, one is very cynical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are the two sort of halves of his personality, duking it out in some imagined world in his mind. I think Anna Falchi's characters, multiple, represent the woman that he was in love with and murdered and feels intense guilt over.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's in a coma because he attempted suicide. And so he's sort of like reliving. And that's why the whole thing is so romanticized and looks very dreamy and music video-y.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not real. It's his imagination. It's his romanticized version of him sort of trying to put right the things he did wrong.
Okay.
And I think towards the end, I think it could also be read as just like a straight up kind of descent into madness movie.
Yeah.
With Rupert Everett's character just fucking unraveling bit by bit to the point where he's just like, oh, there is no difference between the living and the dead. I'm just going to murder everyone. I think there's a strong argument for that as well. But I think the thing that sort of clinched it for me is at the very end where Francesco and Nagi are effectively trying to escape, and they drive through a tunnel, and they think they're sort of going to make it. They're going to get out of Is it Buffalora? Like the small town that they claim to hate.
And they admit that they've never gone that far outside of town.
Yeah. And they sort of get there, and there's just like nothingness. It's like the edge of a cliff.
Yeah. The road just drops away beneath them, doesn't it?
Yeah. So they're sort of like literally and metaphorically trapped because they're inside Franco's head.
Okay.
And then this point where Nagi's injured and he says his only real line of the film, at which point Francesco is sort of rendered the backseat driver.
Mm-hmm.
Like he can barely get a coherent sentence out at that point, as if like the pure side of him has kind of conquered in a way.
Yeah, okay.
He's taken dominance and he's sort of found peace, and he's probably going to die. That's my read.
Interesting.
Okay. You don't look like you were expecting that at all.
I wasn't. Like,
Okay.
it's one of those. I think it just recontextualizes so much that I would need to like go back and rewatch it with that in mind to see kind of how it holds up.
Yeah. I don't know how much of that is intended or if that's just me reading too much into it. But it's so...
What point did that theory come to you then?
Oh, at the end.
Okay.
Well, when he arrived at the hospital, because Franco's obviously important.
Yeah.
We don't see him very much. And I mean, they have such similar names, Francesco and Franco. Like, you know, there is a lot of really obvious stuff that sort of lends weight to them being one and the same. And the fact that it does look so dreamlike, it doesn't look real, it's so fantastical and weird. The only real explanation is that it's inside someone's head. To me, anyway.
Okay, and so... Interesting. So, yeah. So no, I'm just trying to process that in my head.
Sitting with it for a second.
So how would the not necessarily plot twist, but the development that Franco had been stealing Francesco's kills work?
In what sense?
Well, obviously, like you find out that Franco's taken credit for all the people that Francesco's been killing across the entire film.
Mm-hmm.
So
because it was Franco.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying it makes sense.
No, I'm just
I'm not 100% on it, but I've been sitting with it for the last 24 hours, and that's the closest thing to an explanation I can come up with.
Look, it's not enough that it's just a bit weird, and it's weird with a meaning.
I need meaning.
No, I'd love to rewatch it now and actually like have that in mind. Because I mean that the development of Nagy at the end, he's had the entire film where he said nothing but one syllable, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he delivers a complete sentence. Now, I thought because they mentioned throughout the film that the time between death and kind of resurrection is getting closer.
Yeah.
In my head, Nagy had died and had come back to life. But this was before I knew that the cause of this was by that root. So theoretically, it's only people who've been buried
contained within the Buffalora cemetery.
They've been infected. So yeah, like it's definitely significant. He speaks a coherent sentence at the end.
Yeah, I think basically everything that we see is inside one man's head. And the fact that I just think it's really interesting. Like this guy killed several people. Well, I think committed 7 murders, including the woman that he loved, which he deeply regretted. And that's why Francesco is sort of doomed to keep playing that out in the first accidental and then intentional murders of the same woman, effectively, because it's just his guilt talking.
So, I need to explore like the 3 characters and their relationship with Francesca now, because obviously the first one is a mutual, if inappropriate, love, right? Mm-hmm. They are in love. The second is the mayor's aide, is it? If memory serves, so she she has that. Sorry, she has
that strange moment where she talks about being sexually assaulted, but now she's in love with him.
Surprisingly throwaway line.
And like, if that wasn't written inside a dude in a coma's head, I don't know what was. That's the only thing that makes that make sense.
And then you find out that the third incarnation is a prostitute, right? It's sleeping with people.
/sex worker.
Sex worker, yeah. So, okay, I think I need time to process that and to work out. Because again, like they're different types of love, right? Like,
Yeah,
the
but I
second one
suspect-
kind of ends with platonic love
Mhm.
because she still says that she loves him, but not in a romantic way.
Yeah.
The third one is, I suppose, an artificial love because of
It's
the fact that
transactional.
it's transactional. She's a sex worker, and in fact, when her roommate says that, or at least when Francesca says to her roommate that she said that she loved him, that immediately bumped up the cost of the time they spent together, right?
Yeah.
So it is significant that love played a part in that.
Yeah. And that the more in love you are, the more costly.
Yeah. Well,
Whether that's financial or emotional or,
like when you said that kind of theory first off, I was like, and he woke up and it was all a dream.
I know.
Like,
I know.
oh my God.
I hate that. It's to me that's just like Deus Ex Machina bullshit.
Right. Like
I hate
I
it.
have respect for you, Sarah. But,
I'm so sorry to disappoint.
Like, I think I need to rewatch it now with that in mind, because that
Okay.
the more I think about it, the more plausible it seems, because it explains a lot of the weirdness, like you say, and not just because it's one thing to be in this weird like this kind of like music video aesthetic, but you're having the same actress play 3 different characters, and absolutely no attention is brought to that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not as if Francesca goes, "Oh, you look like someone I knew." Like, it's brushed over completely. The only person the only person that knows that is the viewer. And the only and Francesca only seems to like allude to it.
Yeah. Without ever saying it.
So I think it does explain a lot of the actual like narrative events in the film.
Maybe Rupert Everett was just right in that it is a comic strip come to life, and that's all it is.
Well, if it's pulpy, I think it, if it's like knowingly pulpy, if it knows what it is, then to a certain extent, I think it can get away with tropes that seem kind of hackneyed.
Yeah.
You know, like oh, he woke up and it was all a dream, because that's the type of thing that these sort of trashy, cheap kind of books would contain.
Yeah. I mean, well, if we boil it down to its essence, speaking in terms of the title, it's about a dying man who's sort of reliving and romanticizing and embellishing the great love of his life and how he fucked it up and doing what he can to find some peace in his final moments. That's what I think. I think I enjoy it more with that reading in mind.
Yeah, I can see that. I think like any film, like finding out a film, like you said earlier, any film that is enjoyable on a surface level is fantastic. Any film that is enjoyable on a surface level and also has deeper meaning is even better. It's like parody movies that in and of themselves are fantastic examples of their genre. I think it was
Popstar.
Yeah. Walk Hard. I think it was Minnie said the other day that Rosie and I were talking about Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
Like, Galaxy Quest is such a great stand-up of Star Trek. But
Grabthar's hammer
in itself is a fantastic sci-fi movie, because it goes to show the love and affection that the writers have for the film they are parodying. And that itself lends it more credence, lends it more impact, because it's good at both things it is doing, not only being a sci-fi film, but also a sci-fi parody.
I think it's hard to pull off.
Oh, for sure.
Very hard
for
to pull off.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So, with that in mind, what are your final thoughts then? Would you recommend this to anybody, and would you score it out of 10? Would you watch it again? Well, I'm guessing you will watch it again.
Yeah. Because of my limited time, maybe not in the immediate future, but I would like to, certainly with your analysis in mind. I definitely recommend it to people. I think it's quite a it's known within its kind of audience, but you're shooting daggers at your cat.
I'm making angry eyes at a cat that's making noise.
I think it's well known by horror fans, but
I think so. Yeah, it was curious to me reading the critical reception because it's very hit and miss, but it's really popular with fans.
But Scorsese said it was like Scorsese's quoted as saying it's one of his favorite films of the decade or like year or something like that. Yeah, I think they use that in the trailer.
Okay.
So it has impact, it does have an impact. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's one of those films that is known within the audience that it's for, but almost unknown entirely to everyone else.
I think you're probably right. It's a film that definitely deserves a wider audience. It deserves reappraisal. Actually, I think from what I've seen, Michele Soavi is quite kind of a visionary. I mean, obviously, he was Dario Argento's protege or assistant for a long time. So that makes a lot of sense in terms of the visual, how striking his visuals are. It definitely makes me want to watch The Church now and probably go back and rewatch Stage Fright because I have a lot of love for that film anyway.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So
cool.
would you rate it out of 10? Do you think it defies rating?
Ooh.
Or out of 5 or whatever rating you choose to?
I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think as I was watching, I forgot to actually log it on Letterboxd, but provisionally gave it a 3.5.
Okay.
But I think with that in mind, with your analysis in mind,
don't let me affect you.
No,
go with your gut.
No, but it lends a whole new dimension to it that deserves sort of critiquing and deserves reevaluating. So yeah, I'd agree with a 4 out of 5. Cool. Like it's by no means perfect, but I think it's a lot of fun, and
it's just unlike anything else.
Yeah, and it's so unique.
It's hard to be unique. Yeah,
and I think it's one of those things where, like, growing up when I did like Shaun of the Dead was touted as the zom-rom-com, whatever it was called at the time, and I think.
It owes a lot to this kind of.
This kind of did that a long time before. I mean, Shaun of the Dead was 2004 or something like that.
Yeah.
And 10 years
so
prior.
A whole decade, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I want to know what Simon Pegg thinks of Dellamorte Dellamore.
Should we just drop him an email, see if he's happy coming on the show? Can you imagine?
I'm sure he'd clear his schedule.
Edgar Wright as well. Just get all of them. Well, so I thought of Nick, but that dynamic, the straight man who is, I mean, straight in like inverted commas, because Francesco is quite a campy character, but he's certainly not as. He's certainly sort of.
I mean, straight is not normally a word that's applied to Rupert Everett, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah, and then compared to Nagy, who is the kind of sidekick, who's the Nick Frost character.
Yeah.
It as I was watching it, that comparison did jump into my mind because I was thinking about like love and death and stuff and romantic comedies that are also zombies and stuff, and Shaun of the Dead jumped to mind, and yeah.
Cool.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised that we've ended in agreement.
I guess I don't think we're ever. I think it was purely the fact that I don't think we were ever going to disagree because like I knew you liked this movie. I think, like I said, we came into this. I think I just, because of the fact, as I said before, because of the fact I hadn't seen this movie before, it's really easy to get swept up in the weirdness and not to think anything more of it. And I think going back and rewatching it with your eyes open it's a film that deserves it, because there's so much more explored within it than you perhaps notice at first because it's so bonkers.
Yeah, I think so. I'm really glad that we've covered it this week actually, because it gave me the opportunity and the impetus to view it a bit more critically. Like I say, that it's the first time I've watched this film that those things have even entered my head.
Yeah,
so.
well, it's often hard if you've got a film that has underlying themes. It's kind of hard to pick up on them if they're not being particularly
if you're not
overt with
looking
it.
for them.
And
I agree.
You might get like 90% into a film and think, oh, is that an underlying theme?
Yeah.
But by then you've missed kind of 10, 20 clues throughout the movie that have been dropped, you know. And,
for sure.
I think there are some films that do require multiple viewings, as we've spoken about multiple times before on this podcast.
What we need to start doing is creating podcasts that require multiple listens. We need to start layering in some subtext somewhere. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I think that's probably a good place to...
I'll leave you in charge of that.
Oh, no. Don't leave me in charge of anything. I can barely talk most of the time. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I'm stoked. This was great. Stoked and soaked.
Yeah, I had to
apparently. I think this is great. I had a great time chatting about this. Even I'm kind of keen to watch it again at this point. So stay tuned for that. If you want to support us, if you want to follow us on social media, I'm going to include all of the relevant links in the podcast blurb. What we would really fucking love is if you like the show, if you think you know someone who would like the show, if you could share us or maybe give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, that would be fan-bloody-tastic.
For sure.
But until next time, stay spooky.
Bye-bye.